Hey there, in this video we're going to show you how to remove and reinstall the bushing and or seal out of a extension housing from a 4L60E 700R4 TH350. So first things first, you're going to need to gather up some tools. So you'll want a hammer and a couple of bushing drivers. You'll need one for the bushing if you're going to replace the bushing, and then one large enough to go ahead and install the new seal. Alright, the next thing you're going to need is a paint marker or a pen or something to index your drive shaft. Then you're going to want to have a flat blade screwdriver, preferably one you can hammer on just like this, so that you can remove the old seal from the extension housing. And you're going to want to do that while the extension housing is still bolted onto the transmission. Okay, and this is the assumption here is that the transmission is still in the vehicle running and driving, but you want to replace the bushing and or seal because one or both is worn or leaking fluid or whatever. Okay. You're also going to have a small pry bar on handy. This pry bar will help you remove the drive shaft on the differential and or pinion end. So after you do your indexing and you remove your retention straps for 7/16 of an inch bolts, you're going to take your pry bar and just gently pry forward between the yoke and the U-joint so that you can push the drive shaft inward through the transmission and allow it to drop out from the pinion yoke. Okay, you're also going to have a 1/2 inch impact. I recommend you use a 1/2 inch impact along with a 15mm socket, a wobble socket like this, but perhaps an extension is suitable, and that will allow you to take off the 6 or 4 15mm bolts holding the extension housing onto the transmission. So after you remove the seal, you're going to go ahead and remove your drive shaft after you've indexed it, and then you're going to go ahead and remove the extension housing itself. All these bolts get between 30 and 35 foot-pounds of torque, and I've seen as low as 25 work perfectly fine. So 25 to 35 is a safe bet. If you want, go ahead and use a little bit of blue Loctite on the threads just to make sure none of them back out due to vibration. Alright, so now what you want to do is get the extension housing either on the bench or on the floor. Make sure that it's a good sturdy workbench if you're going to use a bench. Otherwise, just use your floor. A lot of times that's what I'll do. And then you're going to want to remove the old bushing, assuming that's part of the job. So these bushings can wear over time, and that'll cause vibration and poor interaction or interchange between the slip yoke and the extension housing itself. So if the bushing does get worn, it's a good idea to replace it. So go ahead and grab some ear protection, and then all you're going to do is take the bushing driver and handle, insert it like so, and with about 3 or 4 firm smacks, you should knock it right out. Alright, now go ahead and wipe the inside diameter where the bushing goes. Alright, and while you're doing this, just inspect the whole housing itself. Now that you have it on the bench like this, okay, there's going to be a seal that goes here. If that seal is kind of old or feels hardened, just go ahead and replace it. They're like $1 at any transmission part supplier. Okay, check your threads for your transmission mount as well. If this mount is also worn out, replace it. Do not run a worn out or cracked mount, because that'll wreak havoc with your transmission, especially the rear gear train, and can actually damage it if it's really extreme. A lot of times folks will feel bumps and unusual kind of like bumpiness when they come to a stop or when they take off, and if it's coming from the rear or mid part of the vehicle, it might be this trans mount. So always check that. Alright, have your new bushing. You can put a little Loctite here, though in my experience it's not necessary. So just make sure you sit it into the bore, get it as square as you possibly can, and then go ahead and just tap it in just a little bit to get it started, and then 2 or 3 firm smacks, maybe 4 tops, and you'll be able to seat it. And then just finish it off. Alright, just like that. If you have some petroleum jelly handy, go ahead and coat the inner diameter. Alright, and then the other thing you could do, and I guess I should have mentioned this earlier, but have your drive shaft handy and then go ahead and try to insert this housing over the drive shaft slip yoke. Alright, sometimes these bushings will be tight. This is a good example. So if it's tight like this, smack it in a little bit further. But if it's still tight, then either the bushing's out of spec or the housing itself is warped. So if the bushing is out of spec, it shouldn't slide over the slip yoke. As we can see, that's what we have here. So I'm going to go find another bushing, and we're going to see if another bushing will work better. Okay, both of them work. I actually like this one, so I'm gonna go ahead and install it and see if this will work. If this doesn't work, then the housing has to be replaced. Okay, fits like a glove. So this bushing was a bit out of spec. Every once in a while you'll see that. So it'd be a good idea to actually do this test with your slip yoke before you install it. Alright, so now that we have the bushing installed, we can go ahead and lube it up. Now we're going to swap out our drivers, and we're going to position the seal. Now, before you install the seal, eyeball the inner diameter here for the seal itself. Every once in a while we'll see extension housings where there's some undulation, some kind of like wear, if you will, in certain portions of the inner wall. And if you install the seal as is, you'll have a leak there. I've seen this a few times. So if you have wear here, then obviously you're not going to want to run this. Like I said, you want to inspect this area here before you do any installation of your bushing. But if it's a little bit, I would say it's not too severe, go ahead and install, or apply rather, some RTV. Okay, apply RTV. Black or red is fine. I wouldn't use blue, I'd use black or red, high temp, and that will take up any kind of gaps or areas where it might leak. Alright, I don't see that here, so I'm just going to install this as is. So again, a few firm smacks and that should be it. Double check all the way around the perimeter. Make sure it's fully seated. Don't hesitate to smack it a few more times if you think it needs it. Okay, lastly, go ahead and heavily coat the sealing surface. And then test again with your slip yoke. Okay, that feels nice and smooth, fits like a glove. Alright, then everything else is basically the reverse. You know, reinstallation is simply the reverse of removal when it comes to the housing and everything else. So again, 25 to 35 foot-pounds of torque. Use blue Loctite if you feel it's necessary. For your speed sensor bolt, just get it good and tight. Obviously take the speed sensor out before you do any of this R&R. Again, I should have mentioned this earlier, but it's so common sense that, you know, I just subconsciously omit it. But I should have mentioned it. And then if you notice that the O-ring on the speed sensor is worn, go ahead and replace it. They're readily available. Otherwise, that's basically it. So that's how you remove and reinstall a bushing and or seal from your 700R4, 4L60E, or TH350 extension housing. Got to see a little bit of a bonus in that we had an out-of-spec bushing, so now you know what to look out for if you weren't already aware that might be a situation you might encounter. So thanks for watching.